Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. China Dream, which was an idea first proposed by President Xi Jinping on November the 29th, 2012, is now 4 years old. What progress has been achieved by China and the Chinese people in following their China Dream during these past 4 years? How should we evaluate China and the U.S. political policy at home and abroad in the context of the re-establishment of the international order? And how should every individual, as part of the whole country, fulfill his or her China Dream? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Xu Qingduo, current affairs commentator, and Teng Jimeng, associate professor at Beijing Foreign Studies University. But before we begin our discussion, let's take a look at this.
On November 29, 2012, Chinese leader Xi Jinping shared his concept of the Chinese dream with his colleagues and the media at an exhibition in Beijing.
What is the Chinese dream? I believe to achieve the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is the greatest Chinese dream in modern history.
近代最伟大的中国梦。
Since then, Chinese dream has become a buzzword in Chinese society. How do Chinese citizens understand it?
When I first heard about the Chinese dream, my understanding was that once this dream is realized, life will be improved in the countryside as well as the cities.
Being able to talk about dreams means we have already achieved the basics. Only when a country is prosperous can we talk about dreams.
4 years ago, I was starting a business. My wish was to create an internet product to replace traditional businesses.
My biggest achievement is to earn some money for my children, buy them clothes and study materials, using hard-earned cash from my own pocket and not having to depend on them.
Work harder, earn more, and be promoted.
Our house and heating system have been greatly improved, so our family's dream has come true. But my own Chinese dream has not been realized yet. To buy an apartment in Beijing, housing prices are just too high.
The Chinese dream cannot be achieved by one person. It needs us all, migrant workers, startup entrepreneurs, farmers. Only when everyone does their job well will the dream be realized.
Well, the term Chinese dream encourages different interpretations. But how are ordinary people's dreams related to the big Chinese dream? And how do individual ideals match national aspirations? We sat down with Zhao Qizheng, a former spokesperson for the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference.
If the nation's goals have been met but personal ones have not, then the Chinese dream has not been realized. The majority of people's dreams and the nation's dream are in fact progressing at the same time. The individuals are motivated, and so the country will achieve a great success. We believe that the Chinese dream is closely related to everyone's own dreams.
But China still has to overcome tough challenges if it's to achieve long-term prosperity.
Our biggest challenge is the economy. How can we keep going? The higher GDP gets, the harder it is to keep growing. That's why we're promoting innovation.
Zhao says many industries, such as coal and mining, have already reached their limit. The urgency is to find new engines of growth.
Now, gentlemen, many of the viewers who are watching our program may be wondering aloud how we can dream. Is it about the super speed computer, the infrastructure, GDP, environmental protection, success of Jack Ma of Alibaba, or Huawei, Ren Zhengfei, or the tallest basketball player Yao Ming in the NBA? What is your definition about China Dream?
Well, first thing first, I think that it must be a national dream. It must be the national aspiration. I think in China, you just cannot say, well, this is my individual dream. China is a nation deeply rooted in psyche of one nation, one people. And so in this sense, I think to talk about China dream, we talk about macro, in a sense, at the macro level, it's about the rejuvenation of a great nation. Since China suffered the humiliation of Western, the yokels unequal treaties since the 18th and 19th century, China has, in a sense, the great aspiration to be ranked among the great powers of the international community. And so, to me, China Dream represents a collective dream. Of course, this collective consists of many individual dreams, smaller dreams. A business person to be successful in his business, an educator successful in his teaching career, a researcher in his own research career, a migrant farmer being successful to raise the family, to send his kids to school.
Well, obviously, Jimeng adopts a holistic perception about what the nation aspires to achieve, and that gets very close to the official definition of the China Dream. Yes. Obviously, it's about national rejuvenation and how to tell a China story. What do you think?
Well, I understand the China Dream on different layers, on two layers, let's say. On the first layer, it's similar to Jimeng's definition. That's a national dream, collective dream of the Chinese people, basically revival of the Chinese greatness. You know, we have never close to the level of our greatness as a nation for China. And on the individual level, it composes a lot of little dreams, let's say, little dreams of young people, like for young entrepreneur, probably his or her dream is to become another Jack Ma or become another Yao Ming. So that's a dream. Or for like an express delivery man, the dream is simple, like I want to send my kid to a good school, to a good university. I want to buy a pickup so I can have my own business. That's your personal dream. But remember, these two dreams are interlinked, are intertwined. Without a stable and a peaceful nation, without this market economy with tremendous opportunities, it's impossible for individuals to realize their dreams.
I wonder if you notice the use of re-emergence of China as a great power, because I interviewed the last governor of Hong Kong, Mr. Chris Patten, and he said, over the past 20 centuries, for 18 centuries, China had been the strongest in the world. And therefore, what we are talking about and what is taking place in China is actually rejuvenation and the re-emergence of great power. It shouldn't come as a surprise, like Napoleon Bonaparte said, don't wake up the sleeping giant. Well, maybe this is a mistake by admitting China into the WTO back in the year 2001. Is it meant to be a joke?
I don't think so, but I think we mentioned Chris Patten. I think that there is always a cycle in terms of Chinese history. If we look back to Chinese history, oftentimes we Chinese think in terms of century. And in the West, for example, in the US, people think in terms of decade. And in Europe, perhaps people think in terms of generation. But when we think in terms of a century. And if you look back to the 7th century, the 8th century, like the Tang Dynasty, we see that very cycle from this very war-torn country and into this very prosperous, very harmonious, and also a very, in a sense, united nation. And so in this sense, I think that China has a 100-year cycle of history. And so beginning from Tang Dynasty, for example, at every dynasty, and there is the Tang Taizong, and then there is Tang Gaozong, and all these great emperors that witnessed the rise of China, the rise of great empire. And so right now, I see another cycle starting from perhaps 1911, since the 1911 revolution, the Xinhai Geming, and perhaps the new democratic revolution, which we won in 1949, when Mao and his lieutenants laid the foundation of a revolutionary People's Republic of China. And now with the opening and reform, Deng Xiaoping also laid the foundation for a second frog leap in terms of China's economic reform, in China's economic prosperity, national unity, and also China's emerging as a world power.
But I'm afraid the rapid economic expansion of the PRC was viewed by most in the West as very assertive, and to say nothing of the rapid military build-up in the South China Sea. They always use the word of assertiveness to describe the behavior of the Chinese rise. Well, I wonder if President Obama has the book Rise and Fall of Great Powers by Paul Kennedy in his mind when he said the United States is ready to lead the world for yet another 100 years. And very quickly, the Chinese leader Xi Jinping said, we're ready to lead. I mean, it doesn't come as a surprise to lead for 100 years more. China, the understatement of President Xi Jinping suggested clearly that we went through the glories of the past by leading the world for centuries, as you said wisely. Yeah, the century is a basic unit for China to employ in describing our history, right?
Well, China is very different from Western civilization. Many people say China is a civilization state, which is different from the modern, sovereignty idea, sovereignty based like Western nations here. Yes, China's concept of time is different from Western ideas. We talk about centuries. And also, if you look at even the late Qing dynasty, at that time, China's GDP is roughly 1/3 of the whole world. So now, look at China, we have the largest population. There's no reason we cannot unleash the potential of every Chinese to become a great nation. I think, the stress here is not really about becoming another empire or repeat the greatness of being an empire, of leading the whole world. It's really about every Chinese people having a happy life. And this is as important as for China and also for, I would say, for the countries around the world.
I agree very much with Jindo when he says everyone's individual happiness is important to the nation and also contributes to the happiness, the broad, the big happiness of the international community. I noticed that there is an article published on the National Interest website by a professor, and he was talking about this very notion of 天下, all under heaven, the Chinese notion of that we gain and you gain. One individual gain would result in the gain of the other. And so in this sense, China's gain, China's kind of contributing to the world, or Chinese dream is not about one nation gaining happiness, but it's all about gaining the happiness for the rest of the world. And in this sense, the Chinese dream and Chinese aspiration is very sincere.
And I think your review of what Mr. Mayer says in the National Interest magazine is very close to what Professor Daniel Bell says in his book, Meritocracy, about the rise of China and the virtues concerning China's strength. It's about the law and order in the context of harmony.
And also the Chinese model.
Inclusive world order that pursues the co-prosperity between different major powers and economies, instead of like TPP that rejects China's participation. So what do you think?
That's a good point. If you compare China and the US, for example, well, you see China is a more confident power in the demonstration of being open-minded, being inclusive. Look at RCEP, basically Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which composes of 16 countries, and also this FTAP, basically all the APEC members, 21 of them. So it's very inclusive. If you look at the diction of the Chinese leaders, they talked a lot about this common community of destiny, community of common destiny, and also it's about a win-win situation or all-win situation. So it's inclusiveness, it's confidence, it's open-mindedness.
It means level playing field. I mean, but this is very controversial for the Americans, some of which, like lawmakers in the House, rejected it, listing RMB as one of the major reserve currencies in the special drawing rights basket of IMF, to say nothing of their strong reluctance to join the AIIB.
I think there's something to do with, when the United States, the politicians see a rise in China, somehow you see more anxiety on the US side, which actually is potentially a threat to the stability of the world order.
Mears Hamel kept talking about the zero-sum game, zero tolerance for the rise of China's maritime power. But let's talk about American dream. What does that mean?
Well, to me, American dream, I've been living in the country for 2 years as a Fulbrighter in New York and in Boston, and I think that very dream has to do with individual dreams. I basically associate with the academics, and I see many young professors still kind of like working hard in order to achieve the status, in order to achieve the fame, in order to, for example, to buy his own house in the suburbs, to buy his apartment in the city, to have children, to have family, to send. And so American dream is basically an individual dream. It's all about a personal dream. It's all about personal aspiration, personal success. I think it's very different from what we are here back in China. I mean, this very national, communal, and also a familial thing. To them, it's all about rising to fame and power and wealth in order to demonstrate his personal strength, his personal capability. Here in China, we talk about community, working together so that we can achieve a common goal. And so in this sense, if you look at this Chinese dream in a broader sense, and look at BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, it's all about being inclusive, getting and joining nations all together so that all nations benefit.
But given the very close presidential race in the United States and the strong opposition by the grassroots Americans, the blue-collar workers, to the elite and elite media system, I mean, yes, liberal democracy has prevailed since the age of industrialization, particularly the end of the Second World War. There's no doubt about that. But you are watching Dialogue with Mr. Teng Jimeng and Mr. Xu Qingduo. We're discussing China Dream and perhaps a comparison with the American equivalent. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Obviously, China had been left marginalized by the industrialization, which was a huge success in Europe. But what about the rise of the internet in the age of the digital technology? Will this close the gap between China and the rest of the world in terms of realizing the China Dream, Jimeng?
Well, absolutely. I think if we look at the success stories recently, for example, over the past few decades, Ma Yun rose to fame and wealth, and also this international sort of fame, and so in that
and
sense,
hundreds of startup companies by young people who returned from Europe and the United States after 4 years study.
He basically raised the ties of this internet economy, this booming internet economy, and created his own dream empire and created many dream jobs for these youngsters, young college graduates, fresh out of the college, or these migrant farmers' kids. I mean, fresh out of the paddy fields, perhaps, got some job training at Alibaba, out on the road, start their own online shops, and became almost like millionaires. And look at the statistics, almost every year. I mean, Ma Yun creates basically millionaires, virtually, literally, in that very company. And so it's very much kind of a warm story I enjoy sharing with the rest of the world.
But I'm afraid many others might be very skeptical about the success and the glow of success of Jack Ma, because that'll create fiction about fame, success. It's far from, it's divorced from the reality that many or most of the migrant workers pursue when they want to be part of the rapid process of urbanization, to be a decent citizen with a hukou that shares the same welfare and social security with the city dwellers.
Well, exactly. If you look at the mobility for the Chinese population, the migrant workers from the countryside to the biggest cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, they are pursuing their own dream. Yes, they are working at the construction site, but they are dreaming big. Maybe one day they could be a business owner. They can be as successful as Jack Ma, probably. And also, if you look at over the past 4 years since the concept of China Dream first mentioned, like 4 years ago, on average, there are 1,500 firms being registered on an average day. What does that mean? That means like
Silicon Valley, Zhongguancun itself, all throughout the world.
4 years later, maybe 10 years later, you would see probably 10 Jack Ma. Who knows? And also, of course, you don't need to be Jack Ma. Probably you don't need it to be a form of Jack Ma. That would be enough for a lot of people. So for college graduates, for the young people coming back from overseas, from European countries, the U.S., why they are coming back to China? Because there are opportunities, because they want to realize their dream in this land.
These days, not only Chinese leadership, but scholars, policymakers, and ordinary folks are all talking about the sustainability and the resilience of the Chinese economy. And Premier Li Keqiang, for example, talked about massive entrepreneurship and the spirit of innovation in the process of urbanization. Do you think this will motivate millions of young university graduates in creating their own business or getting close to China Dream?
Well, absolutely. I think this is the right time for this very talk of mass entrepreneurship, because the infrastructure is out there. Look at Chinese internet. Right now, China has 700 million internet subscribers. There's a huge population out there, which means massive business opportunities. And so youngsters returned and created their own startup companies. I know a very good case study at Point. Look at this box office ticket selling company, Pure. And so in that company was basically created by returnees from overseas. And also Goala, see Chiguara, but then it's not the name in Spanish. But in this case, you can see these youngsters creating these jobs and providing jobs and provide trainings. Remember, one of the challenges facing this Chinese dream is that rural kids, rural population, young people from rural countryside without college education, kids by these migrant workers, they need training. And so training, education became a major hurdle for these youngsters to join these high-tech companies.
Well, many of those skeptical Europeans and Americans would say, hey, there's no big deal about the Chinese economic miracle. But what about the issue of faith?
Well, speak of
religious belief, and China comes under fire from the West over the issue of human rights, family planning policy, one-child policies, draconian regulations about this and that, abusive, behavior of the local government officials in many aspects of the social governance. What do you think of the scathing criticisms we have from the West?
I think for any country, no country can claim they are perfect. So is the Chinese society. Remember, at the same time, with all the numbers we mentioned, but at the same time, China is not perfect. China is a developing country. Yes, there are problems. We have to admit that, and based on that, we can improve. I think China is improving. China is making progress. Many people criticize China for the lack of religious freedom. But if you look at the number of the religious believers in China over the past 10 years, it's
explosive growth. It's
right.
Explosive
so
growth.
how can you explain it if there's no freedom of religion?
I wonder if you guys have been to Zhejiang, for example, Wenzhou, where you see the rise of
Shandong province.
Yeah, Shandong.
Yes.
Look at the churches.
Go there and take a look. Seeing is believing. And also, what do you think of the latitude on the social media by the netizens, particularly the angry youth, the 屌丝, those kind of young people who are so critical and outspoken in criticizing malpractices of the government and seriously flawed whatever public policies.
But to me, it's a sign of progress, like Jindo has been mentioning. It's a sign of progress in terms of China modernizing itself. Back in the past, there's no channel for this kind of a social criticism. Now with internet, with the chat room, with the Weibo, with Weixin, all these become the kind of a proper channel for young people to vent their criticism, to vent their anger perhaps. But then once again, it shows that China is becoming increasingly transparent. It's becoming increasingly free. It's freer, I would say. And at the same time, diversity. Diversity is now becoming a hallmark of Chinese society.
Now, gentlemen, we talk about the dream smartly, but as opposed to perhaps to nightmares. So let's look at Arab Spring, the Color Revolution in some of the young developing countries. What is it that has helped China avoid a repeat of Arab Revolution in our country? Because many in the West are watching out for, hey, democratization may be the next step for a country that is fasting, having a growing army of the middle class whose demands for social justice would be unraveled.
But I think people tend to forget that yes, democracy is a good thing. Nobody denies that. But the thing is before that, you need to have economic stability, economic growth. It's necessary. If you look at the Arab Spring countries, you can see their unemployment rate is 25% for the young people aged between 18 to 25. There is a reason behind that. And also, you need to have a rule of law, probably relatively freedom for press, and also a strong governance. Good governance for this country. That's necessary foundation for democracy. Without those foundation, this country tend to be in chaos.
You know what?
Like
Last year I went to Johannesburg to cover the summit dialogue between China and many African countries. And I was appalled and I was shocked to learn that the unemployment rate of this democracy, which saw an end to apartheid in 1994, has the jobless rate at perhaps 40% for the young people. This was alarming.
It's appalling.
This is appalling. But of course, they feel very confident about the parliamentary politics, the multi-party democracy, or whatever. Well, this is we agree to disagree about the charm of democracy.
Right.
But coming back to examine world order. I mean, this is something that the rest of the world also keeps talking, from Shangri-La Dialogue to Xiangshan Forum to Munich Security Conference. I mean, policymakers have been talking about the assertiveness of the Chinese military build-up and our security outlook. What do you think of the Chinese vision? Earlier we talked about the Belt and Road Initiative, which is meant to be inclusive. But what about, say, will that be a nightmare for the rest of the world?
Well, I don't think so. I think the Chinese military has always behaving, as we say in Chinese, under the leadership of the party. It's the party that controls this barrels the gun. And so the military has a role to play, but then everything has to serve the very national interest. And the national interest is that China needs a long-term period of economic prosperity. And that prosperity must not be disrupted by a potential war with the rest of the neighbors. And besides, like President Xi, the Chinese DNA doesn't contain that very war kind of a mongering intention. We don't have that very DNA. And so in this sense, the Chinese military has been closely working with the civilian government and working to protect and to preserve and to guarantee a successful transition into the market economy.
The United States talks about China's threat concerning the construction of aircraft carriers, but China, on the other hand, says, look, when you are worried about the freedom of navigation and overflight, why don't you think China should assist the U.S. in protecting and overflight by building more aircraft carriers instead of only focusing on the shows, the islands, and whatever land reclamation there?
Well, I want to contribute a little bit about a strong defense. For any rich nation, especially for China, as the second largest economy, which is still growing rapidly, without a strong army, you are insecure. For every country, if you are becoming rich, you have to have a strong
exactly.
army to
in the
protect your
Qing
interests.
dynasty, the Chinese economy was the strongest, yet we were invaded by the European allies, and the Yuan Garden was looted, set ablaze.
And also, with China's interest, basically now lies in every corner of the world. Basically, everywhere you go, you find the Chinese doing a small business, maybe opening a restaurant or whatever business over there. You need Chinese, the military forces and also the ability, basically, to protect those people in an emergency situation, right?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your insightful discussion about China Dream, and I believe that many of our Chinese friends are also talking about this. So I hope we will keep the dialogue open for more discussions in the foreseeable future, because China's story needs to be shared with the rest of the world. Until then, goodbye.